Hello, and welcome back to Tartan Touchdown Episodes, your weekly dive into all the biggest stories from another dramatic weekend of NFL action. This week, we're shifting gears a little bit, with the playoff picture really starting to take shape. A handful of teams have already been shown the exit door, and today we're asking the big question: what happens next? Which franchises are maybe heading into a rebuild? Who has hope for 2026? And which teams are stuck in the NFL's version of purgatory? We'll also be taking a closer look at something that reared its head across multiple games this week: the dangers of playing already injured quarterbacks. And yes, we'll even slightly talk about the Kansas City Chiefs and the dynasty. So joining me today for all of this to unpack is Gavin. Gavin, how are you?
Oh, it's good to be here. And I know Thanksgiving was the drop for Stranger Things, but this was the weekend that the NFL got turned upside down. So a lot to talk about.
Well, there you go. There you go, guys. We're not only topical in the NFL, we're topical for pulp culture right here. What an interesting week. Maybe felt like a bit of a hangover week because Thanksgiving games were so good. But it was a very exciting week nonetheless. But right before we jump in, make sure you're subscribed to us on YouTube and that your notifications are on for Spotify and all the other podcast platforms so you never miss an episode. And also keep up to date with us on Instagram and TikTok for all the latest Tartan Touchdown content. And like I said, we have loads of cover today. So let's get into it. So before we start talking about rebuilds, injury chaos, and all the rest of it, let's zoom out and look at the playoff picture as it stands after Sunday's Week 14 action. So let's start with the AFC because it's all getting very, very tight up the top. So the Texans' upset over the Chiefs has blown the AFC seeding race wide open. So Houston are now right in the mix for a top 3 seed, depending on how the final 3 weeks play out. The Bills and Bengals played maybe one of the wildest games of the season, and that Buffalo win keeps them on the straight and narrow for the wildcard race. And meanwhile, the Steelers' win over the Ravens puts Pittsburgh back on top of the AFC North, but only just, with that entire division could flip depending on one bad Sunday. So, to break it down, if you don't know, your current standings are the Broncos, the Patriots, the Jaguars, the Steelers, all winning their divisions, with the Bills, the Chargers, and the Texans making a wildcard spot. And you still have the Colts, the Ravens, the Chiefs, the Dolphins, and even the Bengals still in the mix at 1%. I should caveat, 1%. But Gav, so for you, momentum-wise, who do you think is the scariest AFC team right now?
I think from the AFC side of things, you're obviously looking at the top two, but the one that really hits me is the Broncos, which is easy to say because they are sitting in the number 1 spot at the moment, but it's also the point that we discussed in one of our recent pods, which is at that point around home field advantage. So Broncos obviously taking things to mile high, taking you way above sea level, and you've got the weather thrown in there. I think that this is a team now that can really start to look forward to hosting playoff games, and with that comes a big advantage against teams that potentially might be better on paper.
Yeah, it's so funny to say this. I'm still a bit of a Broncos denier, but I feel like I'll come round to them. We'll maybe see what they do this week and maybe next week. Come back to me for week 16 and I'll talk about it, right? But I think you're right. They're one of the teams that really benefits from a home field advantage. They kind of really see them spur on, and they've got a really strong fan base that wants to come in and help them. So yeah, they're an interesting one. They're not my pick for the scariest AFC team. My scariest AFC team are not winning their division right now, but my scariest team, and maybe it comes from being a South team as well, but it's the Texans. And that defense is so scary. And I know their defense is scary, and I know their offense can be scary from a massive comeback that they had on us a couple of weeks ago. But they absolutely steamrolled the Chiefs last night. And their offense wasn't even that great. CJ didn't have the best game of his life. But that defense is so scary. do you think they're likely to take the third spot? Or do you think that we'll see how the rest of the season goes?
You've got a tough crowd here. I think it's interesting because you mentioned about the Chiefs losing to the Texans being an upset. Yes, that's what the odds are saying, but I think that I've been guilty.
I knew they were losing.
Yeah.
I knew they were losing.
I've been guilty of this as much as anyone, really not giving the Texans their credit. I think that we do tend to give too much credit to what teams have done in previous seasons, particularly when they're a big name. I know that the Chiefs are a prime example of that, but certainly we've seen that with the likes of the Eagles and the Bills and a number of the matchups. And of course, you think when the pressure's really on that they're going to come good, but the Chiefs have just fallen away. And I think actually the Texans, after that 0-3 start, even losing CJ Stroud multiple times, they've really just started to put a run together. So I think, yeah, with them sitting only one game behind yourselves in Jacksonville, I think they are ones to be worried about. And like you say, they've done so much of that without CJ Stroud. Even when he's been there, he's not been massively effective. They've got a defense that can just keep them in any game, much like the Ravens and Bucks teams that we've seen historically.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think if you look at what the Texans have coming up in comparison to the rest, so what the Jags have coming up, for example, it's now been a bit flipped because of circumstances, which obviously happened in the game yesterday. But they have the Cardinals, the Raiders, the Chargers, and then the Colts to play. And the likely scenario is they could win all 4 of their last games. And I wouldn't put it past them. Would not surprise me. Whereas on the other edge, the Jaguars have the Jets, the Broncos, the Colts, and the Titans. Now, there's a world where we also could win 4 of those 4 games. The maybe likelihood is we will win 3 of those games, with the Broncos kind of being a total coin flip either way. So the AFC South is looking like a very interesting run now to the final stages. But I guess to go back to the Bills beating the Bengals, how much do you think that win helps the Bills and Josh Allen? It's also the first time Josh Allen's bet Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we talk about teams that know how to win when it matters. So you could put it down to that. I think the one thing that we're maybe missing in this is that Bengals defense has still got massive question marks over it. Admittedly, they were put in some pretty difficult situations with some of Burrow's late turnovers. It's an important win for the Bills in terms of getting back to winning ways. I don't know how much we can read into that in terms of them turning a corner. If I'm perfectly honest, with Josh Allen, you've always got a chance. But as I say, I'm wary, and I know that they were my pick to go to the Super Bowl from the AFC. I'm wary that I think we're still relying a little bit too much on the Bills of old, and obviously Josh Allen himself just to keep them afloat. There are perhaps tougher teams in the AFC.
Yeah, I think so. I think we always talk. We've spoken this. It's not recorded and not in a recorded format. But the Bills are. They do rely so heavily on Josh Allen, and at some point that obviously stops. I mean, do they need a wide receiver 1? Do they need a wide receiver 2? Do they need a third one? Do they need anybody that's going to be able to catch a ball and keep it going for them? So, and I think their game next week is a real show up for them in that division. I think the division's out of reach for them anyway. I
would agree with you. I mean, the fact is that obviously the Patriots won the first meeting between these two teams, and I think at that time we thought, well, that's just an upstart team getting a bit of a surprise result. And we'll maybe come back to talk about this later. When these teams face off, as much as we're saying that the Patriots have got everything to prove in terms of taking on a contender, they've had that 4th place schedule that's been a bit easier on them this year. But actually, I think, whether or not they have a realistic chance of winning the division, this is actually a prove-it game for the Bills as well, to show, can they go and take on another contender? I know they've beaten the likes of the Ravens and the Chiefs, but again, maybe teams that were stronger last year. The Patriots are the hot team right now. Can the Bills go and topple them? So actually, it's theirs to prove.
It's theirs to prove. I know, because you're right. Because if you look at who they've bet, like they lost to the Texans, and obviously we're saying that the Texans have, in the midst of their resurgence, they lost to them, and the rest have all been okay. But I mean, they only bet the Ravens by 1 point. It wasn't.
Yep.
It was a tight
Big
game. It
comeback,
was a high
week 1.
scoring game, so it wasn't a blowout. So yeah, that's we'll talk about it more, I imagine, later on. But it's a very interesting matchup for this week coming. Let's pivot to the AFC North, because we all thought that would be the foot race to see who could get the highest, who would get there. But with the Steelers are now back on top, do we think that Leeds is safe? No.
Personally, I'd say no. I will say, I think for perhaps the first time this season, it looks like, whether it's the analytics you buy into or Vegas, they do think that Pittsburgh is going to win this one. Obviously, again, tiebreakers are coming to play there. They're now a game ahead of the Ravens, and they've got that victory. They do, however, meet again. I do still think that the Ravens are the better team, and we know AFC North in particular, funny things can happen in divisional games. So I don't think we can absolutely chalk this one up and say, that this is a decisive blow for the Steelers. I just feel like the Ravens have probably got a bit more to come back on.
Interesting you say that, because I've just looked at the run of games for the Ravens for their final 4 games, and I won't lie, they're not great. They're not great for them. So they play the Bengals this weekend. And I think the only way the Bengals continue to survive is if they obviously beat them and the Steelers lose their next game of the next 4 games. Then the Ravens play the Patriots, and then they play the Packers, and then they play the Steelers for their last game of the season. So I agree. I do think the Ravens are the better team on paper. I think they're a much better all-round team. I think the Steelers really shine at certain points, but I think Lamar Jackson continues to prove the point that he is a strong quarterback. When you look at the Steelers' the next run of games, they've got the Dolphins this week, which, by the way, who knows, because that game yesterday was wild. Who would have seen that coming for them? I thought they were done in the water, but nope, we can still move the ball to her. Thanks so much for doing that for us. Then they play the Lions, then they play the Browns, that's their other divisional game, and then they'll play the Ravens at the end. So again, the Steelers could end up definitely winning 2 of them. Your Lions games can be a coin flip, and your Ravens game's also a coin flip. So maybe the division is slightly more locked up than we would think it is. But again, who knows?
Yeah. I think that's it. I mean, obviously, back early in the season when the Ravens were 1-5 or whatever, they had a longer runway to try and claw it back. Now, it's a shorter stretch, and it's a tough stretch. So I think you're right. I think that's where things are starting to perhaps swing things in the Steelers' favour. But we'll just need to wait and see, because yeah, it can be funny things can happen when we're into December.
Into December games. Okay, let's flip completely over and let's look at the NFC. So I feel like they're maybe just as chaotic, if not slightly more chaotic, than the AFC. So the Rams put up 45 points this week, which are continuing to strengthen their case as the legitimate NFC team to beat, and they're looking more and more dangerous every single week. The Packers win over the Bears, puts them in control of the NFC North, as that moved the Bears down 6 spots to be the final wildcard spot if the season was to end today and the playoffs were to begin. And the Vikings have obviously shut out Washington and seem to be charging toward a wildcard spot with the momentum on their side. So the current standings are the Rams, the Packers, the Eagles, the Buccaneers, with the Seahawks, the 49ers, and the Bears in wildcard spots, with still the Lions, the Panthers, the Cowboys, and the Vikings in the run. So, Gavin, do you think the Rams are the real Super Bowl contenders from the NFC?
Well, I think I don't know if we can call any one team in the NFC the real standout contender, because it has been a wild season. Every team in this conference has already lost 3 games, and it could well be that your best team in the conference has at least 4 losses against a name before we get to the start of the playoffs. It has been so competitive. It's been so unpredictable. I think the Rams are an excellent team. I think, anyone that kind of picked them to have a deep run had good reason to at the start of the season. But having said that, they have dropped a few interesting games. And the one that I think is perhaps most interesting when we talk about those teams that are on the bubble is actually Carolina Panthers, because I think nobody would say that they are the cream of the NFC. But at the same time, they've beaten the current 1 seed in the Rams. They've beaten the current 2 seed in the Packers at Lambeau, no less. So they are absolutely capable of causing an upset. And, the Bears, I think obviously a lot has been made of that big drop that they took 6 places there just by virtue of the loss to Green Bay. But they do still need to play them again before the season's out. And that one will be at Soldier Field. And, it was an important one for the Packers, but it wasn't a knockout punch, 7 points last night. I think there does seem to be a momentum about Chicago, and this is one where nobody wants to lose a game, but they've got the time to make it up. I don't think that the NFC North is done by any stretch. And of course, you've got the Lions that just kind of happen to be hovering around there, not even in the playoff picture at the moment. So, there could be any one of 3 teams from the North.
Yeah, and I think it's so difficult to even think about who might have the edge out on that, because it's just such a crazy division. And then even when you go back and you look at the NFC West, that's currently right now, what, you got 3 teams in the NFC West who are all there, and they're not, again, I think the Rams are pretty clear of it. So then, well, actually, they're only one game back. They're not even back. They're the same as the Seahawks.
And they have to go to Seattle. So
yep. So who knows? And the 49ers are right behind them on 9-4, which again, we say this every week, how that 49ers team are still there, even considering all their injuries, being held up by glue and paper clips and all the rest of it, is absolutely crazy. When we're talking about the Panthers, and obviously I feel like we're a bit of a Panthers fan pod sometimes, because we talk about them quite a lot. Dan talks about them quite a lot, but they're an interesting one. So I was talking about who they've beaten already. So obviously you mentioned they've beaten the Rams, they've beaten the Packers. They still have the Bucks to play twice. They play all essentially back to back against the Bucks, and I think that will be an interesting one. That's essentially playing, both of those games are going to come down to playing for the division, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And so we love the Panthers, sorry, but we also do love the Packers. Well, we do like the Packers. I don't really know if we like the Packers, but yeah, they've also got the Seahawks as well. The Panthers do have a bit of a tight run. It's mostly just the double Buccaneers game. It's quite intense, isn't it?
Yeah.
What is your opinion on the Vikings shutting out Washington? Do you think that was nice, but we're not getting anywhere? We're not getting further into the playoff mix.
Well, we had our weekly pick 6, and nobody saw the Vikings taking a win of any kind, never mind by a 31-point shutout. So I think that probably tells you all we need to know in terms of what we're expecting there. But we just need to look at the numbers here. The Vikings are four games back on the 7 seeds, less than 1% chance. So, they're on life support. Yeah, it's a nice ray of hope for a team that I think has kind of struggled, particularly with the quarterback position this year. But I think that's all there is to it. And I don't think, as we get into the final weeks of the regular season, that the Vikings are going to enter into the conversation too much, unless they're playing spoiler for someone else.
Unless they're causing some mass amounts of upsets. Okay, well, so that's a good look at the current playoff contentions and what we are continuing to build upon moving forward for the next couple of weeks. Now, let's talk about something that's maybe a little further ahead. Let's flip the script for a minute and talk about the teams that we know are definitely out or looking to be out of the playoffs, and who we think is going to have a bounce back, who are going to be doing some rebuilding, and the ones that are still in contention. So I will go first because I am nice. And I think the Browns are maybe not in as bad of a state as we originally thought they would be. I think that obviously they've had a bit of an unstable quarterback and a bit of an unstable defense because as much as you have Miles Garrett, he can't do everything. I think we will probably have another year of rebuilding, or we're going to try and bridge into the gap. Do you think, Gav, that Shedeur Sanders might actually be the one they've been waiting for, given his last two games?
I think standards are all relative, but given how rough it's been, if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, whether that's by birth or by choice, in the case of O'Brien, he merely adopted the darkness. I think that there is reasons to be cheerful if you're in Cleveland, or at least in the Browns fandom. Shedeur Sanders, obviously, there was a whole psychodrama about his draft day or draft days experience, but that could actually turn out to be one of the most fantastic pieces of business ever, getting him in the fifth round now, because he doesn't need to be a Hall of Famer. He just needs to be a serviceable QB1 for the future. And I think we saw that. And that actually, one of the things that really frustrated me watching the Browns trying to come back, admittedly against the Titans, we should qualify that, but they took the ball out of Shadeur's hands at the end of the game. You have a quarterback who is on a roll, and you go to a gadget play, you put the game on the line, and you put it on one of your receivers to actually make the play, which just seems to be a case of overthinking things. I think the conversation in Cleveland is now going to shift away from who's your QB1 to actually who's the supporting cast around that. And I'm not going to skewer Stefanski just because of one play call at the end of the game, but actually, if you do think you've got a quarterback, who's going to give him the best chance to win? Who's calling the plays? Now that you have that talented quarterback, does that actually encourage more free agents to come to Cleveland? I know it's not exactly the most attractive destination, compared to even, Miami, if you want to go to a mediocre franchise, it at least has the sunshine.
Sunshine.
But yeah, I think there are signs that are pointing up, and hopefully that's something that can give their team a bit of momentum.
Well, yeah, even looking at Shadeur's just stats from last night's game, so he had 42 attempts, completed 23 for 364 yards, which gives him a rating of 97.7. So currently he is on track to complete 71 in the last how many games? 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 games total, which isn't bad considering, and he obviously didn't play the full of the first game he was in. So yes, I think the Browns are maybe in a bit of a better state than they would have maybe thought they would originally been in when they had 5 quarterbacks and didn't know what they were doing with any of them. Yeah. But anyway, Gav, who is your pick for maybe a team that you think how you think their 2026 outlook is going to look? And if you say your own, then you're a cop-out.
I think I should, be honest, because there are, if you talk about a team that has pieces,
yes,
Jackson Dart, Cam Scatterbo, Malik Neighbours, all of them, 2 of the 3 are done for the season. One of them needs to learn how to protect his head. You actually have you have an offensive trio there, and then you've got I keep always harping on about the Giants' defensive line. If they could just get the secondary sorted out, and it looks like we're going to have, we probably are going to be picking up right at the top of the draft. If you can address that between the draft and free agency, then actually there are points where I think the Giants should, I think as a fan, you should be entitled to think that they can at least be competitive next season. I think that the big challenge around that is the head coaching position is, again, in terms of putting the pieces in to allow your team to succeed. I would hope that they think big in this. Kafka is obviously filling him in as interim coach, but he has been part of the reason that the Giants are 2-11 up to this point. You do need to get a transformative coach to lead them going forward. If you're looking at the other teams that are out of the playoffs, I'll be honest, I probably would have gone with the Browns as well. I think the The Jets are the ones that are obviously being talked about in terms of can they get Mendoza next season. I guess that's going to be a question of who ends up with the top pick, because
It's
currently
currently you.
it's currently the Giants, and you'd want to try and get a king's ransom if you can, because there are going to be other quarterback hungry teams out there. The question mark on this one is that the Falcons, because I have ridiculed them at times this season, because everyone likes to say we don't know what Falcons team we're getting. Is it the good Falcons? Is it the team that lost to the Panthers? It's no, the Panthers are actually just a better team than the Falcons. The Falcons are not very good. But at the same time, it's a team that's got the players. There are talented players there, particularly on that offense. You've got Drake London, Bijan Robinson. We've got Michael Penix, who admittedly is still a project, but again, foundations of an offense that you can build around. The South, NFC South, again, not always the strongest division in football. So if you can just start to build and get a bit of a foundation, then that's at least going to give you a shot at playoff contention. But there's work to do. I think, for me, it's the Browns and the Giants, the most obvious choices there.
There we go. That's what I said. You have to,
much as you struggle finding who's
they are. And I guess maybe to flip it on a team that we maybe wouldn't suspect would maybe struggle this year or going into next year. You spoke about them. The guys spoke about it quite at length last week. With situations kind of surrounding the Chiefs game last night. So people who don't know, looks like we are gearing up to Travis Kelce's retirement. The cameras were very, very in and focused on him. There was lots of coverage of him. Very similar to when Jason was playing his last game for the Eagles. There was a lot of coverage on that. Everybody, and I mean everybody, and their dog was at that stadium last night to watch him. So I'm talking about all his friends were there, all his family were there. Obviously, the main woman herself, Taylor, was there, and even her friends were there to watch. So we do think we're gearing up for the Kelce retirement. And if you read any of the Discord online, you can see they are maybe suggesting that Andy Reid also looks to retire. So I guess the question is, can the dynasty move to another coach and some new players in the mix? And whether or not, is it a Tom Brady or is it a Bill Belichick situation?
I think the Patriots are actually a great example to look at there, because there was a big gap in the middle. Now, admittedly, they did keep Tom Brady and Bill around for quite some time, but they went, I believe, 10 years between winning Super Bowls at one point. But the big thing there is, they always talk about the Patriot way, that the culture remained. It was, I think they maybe missed the playoffs once during that time, possibly the year that Brady went out injured.
Was when he was injured. Yeah, exactly that.
But there was always a winning culture that was there. And I think different people will have their own definitions in terms of what a dynasty is. I mean, to me, I think if you look back to the 80s and you talk about the San Francisco 49ers, they moved on from Joe Montana to Steve Young. I think no one would argue that wasn't still a dynasty when Steve Young came in and won Lombardis for the 49ers. And I think for me, Travis Kelce has been a huge, huge part of the Chiefs' success, and there's no denying that. Teams move on from tight ends. I think that it's fair to say. Andy Reid, again, once you start getting to the territory of the head coach, yes, that is a different thing. But again, to me, it's the culture. And actually, if we're drawing comparisons between the Chiefs and the Patriots, if we think about the reasons that they've been successful, a big part of it's actually been evolution. If you look at the Patriots, initially they were built on defense. Then it was all about Tom Brady bombing it to all his different receivers, Randy Moss and Wes Welker and the various different talents. And then, you had the multi-tight end sets. I know we don't like to talk about Aaron Hernandez, but you had Hernandez, you had Rob Gronkowski. Throughout the Patriot dynasty, and it kind of had its two different phases, they found a way to win. It wasn't always the same recipe, but they had that. And I think we have seen that with the Chiefs as well. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes originally came on his rookie deal. and you had the likes of Tyreek Hill, flashy receiver. And then as time's gone by, the names who have been playing receiver at Chiefs has started to dwindle a bit. I mean, okay, most Chiefs would say Rashee Rice is a great player, but really in the context of the league, Rashee Rice, Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore, all these different players that have come through, they can do a job. And part of that's been because they have been able to evolve. And similarly, the defense, they put a lot of money into Chris Jones. And actually, part of the Chiefs' success has actually been about winning those close games and relying on their defense or even the special teams to get through. So I personally don't think that even if Reid moves on, for me, it's still kind of a wait and see. If that winning culture can persist, if you have other coaches who stay within the setup, if you get the general manager continuing to recruit wisely to help keep that core together, then I think you can have a dynasty. Obviously, this season, it just looks like the Chiefs are done. They do need to go away. They need to retool.
They need to go away.
Yeah, but next season, at the end of the day, if they do what they do best, and this is what 10 years I think since they've not, well, it would be 10 years without making the playoffs if they're eliminated from contention. Then it's an aberration. I think the question is, what can they do next year? I think that there's still enough there to keep it going, because you do have a generational, if not all-time quarterback in Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I think when you were talking there about how the thing that made the Patriots dynasty so incredible was the fact that it wasn't the same tools every single time. They would just find a way to win. And I think when you look at the Chiefs and their history, they've been so good at taking a key player and building a building around it. So then when your key player doesn't want to be there anymore and they move on, for whatever reason it is, you then have to then try and find the people that you're going to sub that in with. And I'm curious to know that if it is Kelsey's last year, which is looking to be, what their tight end situation looks like, because he has been the quintessential block and receiving tight end. He's so good at doing both of those roles. Now, whether or not you find somebody else that can do that, or that you've got a talent coming up that can do that, who's learned from him, or whatever the case may be, will be interesting to see. And I'll miss Travis walking off the field and throwing his helmet and shouting, because he seems to do that quite a lot.
But again, it's also, like I say, with that culture, that winning culture, it makes it easier to recruit. Because again,
because you want to go. Who doesn't want to go to the Chiefs? Like,
exactly, that's it. So we talked about, yes, that the Browns have got Shadur Sanders and a talented quarterback, but if you're a free agent tight end that this season, you're getting offers from Kansas City or from Cleveland.
Where are you going?
Who you can think?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we'll see. I know we were all low key praying for the Chiefs' downfall. And maybe it has happened. I think out there at the playoff mix. I think anybody who thinks that they're still in contention is maybe having a bit of a wobble. I don't see them making it. I think as we spoke about earlier, I think the AFC is just too tight, even with what happened, which I guess was now what we're talking about, which is a nice little segue. So we're talking about how fragile teams' futures can be, and nothing impacts both a season and next year's outlook more than the health of a quarterback. So we had some recent cases where teams have had to make maybe some tough calls, and the risks is not maybe played off as well as they hoped it would. So let's talk about Daniel Jones and the Colts. Now, I have maybe a bit of a stake in this that's not maybe positive, and I have nothing against the Colts, and I have nothing against Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones has been a great player even before moving into the Colts. I didn't think he was the problem at the Giants, which I think is now obvious to kind of see moving on and what has happened at the Giants since he's left. But I do think they were reckless to play him yesterday against the Jags, because obviously, if people don't know, he has now torn his Achilles, which looks like he will be out. He'll have a 9-month return window essentially to be back to a level of playing again. He had already had a fractured fibula on his other foot, his other leg, and I don't understand why especially for a quarterback, pretty much any position in football, because it's a running sport, essentially. It's a running and movement, multi-directional sport. And he was he had a brace on his leg that had been made by a friend in college, I'm pretty sure was what he had on. And he's torn his Achilles on not even a touch. He wasn't touched by any of us. He wasn't touched by the defensive line. Nobody hit him. He just bounced back and tore his Achilles. Do you think, Gav, that was the right move to play him, or should they at least have had him sit this one out and value the fracture for next week?
So I think the easy answer to this one is say no, it wasn't the right thing to do.
Hindsight is great.
Hindsight is a wonderful thing. I guess probably the more interesting thing is to try and play devil's advocate and say, well, actually, why are you playing an injured quarterback in this situation? And I think that there's a few possible explanations here. Like I say, I think we can disagree with all of them, but some of them, I guess, are perhaps more understandable than others. So I think let's start with the situation that the Colts have a real opportunity to make the playoffs. They started to wobble a few over the last few weeks, but still very much in the hunt going into the game against the Jaguars yesterday. Bottom line, if you can get that win against a divisional rival, then you keep yourself, in that divisional lead. If the Colts were to come out with a victory, they're the ones that are sitting at 9-4. They're the ones that are the number 3 seed in the AFC. And then there's the other part about also, Daniel Jones. He's a competitor. He just wants to go out and play, and he wants to support them in that success. There's the one theory that I think is a bit less palatable, and I don't know how much truth that there really is in this, but it's also worth considering that Daniel Jones is on a 1-year, essentially, prove-it deal. And if you're looking at his body of work so far, you think, well, yeah, he's done a solid job, but I don't know if it's maybe somewhat comparable to the Sam Darnold situation in Minnesota last year, where actually he did really well, particularly in the early season. But as things went on, perhaps some teams started to figure him out, figure the Vikings out. And with the Colts, I think what we've seen is, yes, Daniel Jones can make plays, but if you can take away Jonathan Taylor and force Daniel Jones to be the one that has to take the team on his back, can he get the job done against the better teams? And I think there's still some valid questions in that space. So if you're then thinking, well, if I want to go on and get that next contract and come back next season, I've still got a bit of work to do. I've still got something to prove. I don't know if that's a factor here, but obviously with a 9-month recovery projected for Jones now, he's in a situation where he is unlikely to be in a roster next season. Now, admittedly, if he can get a comprehensive recovery, and I certainly hope that he does, he would be a very attractive late season target for a team in a situation like the Colts are right now. But yeah, I think he finds himself in a tough situation. And I guess for a sort of typical fan, Daniel Jones did actually get a second contract with the Giants, so he was making in the region of $40 million a year. So that's the kind of money that I think most of us will sit and look at and think, well, I could retire in a 1-year deal right now. But there probably is a bit of thinking, actually, can I try and keep myself going and get that bit of security? So I think you can look at all these things and say, maybe that's what's entered into both the Colts and Daniel Jones' psyche. Having said that, if you're on a minor injury, I think most of us think the best thing just to do is to rest it and hopefully come back stronger.
Yeah. Rest it and hope and just take the loss as a loss, because in saying that, I said all of last night that who knows, because the Jaguars are notoriously terrible at playing against backup quarterbacks. So anything could have really happened yesterday. But it's even trying to figure out who the Colts could target to get somebody in, because we don't think Riley Leonard is currently where he is positioned at as a quarterback. He is not ready to be going up against some of the absolute mountains that they now have to face towards the end of their season. And your choices are not great, to say the least, about who's available, which is a real shame, because obviously, I know at the start of the season, Daniel Jones was in the MVP talks, and obviously the season's gone on. That's maybe changed ever so slightly. But the Colts were in such a good position, and it's a real shame to see it kind of all fall as it has fallen. And obviously, we hope that he recovers. And I'd love to see him playing for a team next year, because I do think that he deserves a full chance and a full fit of health. Let's talk about somebody who's not played tonight. He's not played yet. He's playing tonight. And we now know he's playing because they have confirmed that Justin Herbert will be playing tonight. And for those of you who don't know, he actually had surgery earlier on this week, as he's fractured his hand against the Raiders, and he will play tonight against the Eagles. Now, they are obviously in fighting position for a wildcard spot. If they were to win tonight against the Eagles, they would be on the same record as the Bills. So we'd pretty much sort of cement them in. Do you think they are right to do this, to put him through this again, to see if we can get that next kind of step in? Or do you think we actually would be better benching him for this week and evaluating him and see how he has come next week?
I mean, we're always kind of repeating the question before. It's very easy to say that they should just bench him and wait it out. Obviously, a hand injury, particularly the non-throwing hand, not perhaps as serious as an ankle injury.
Yes.
But
he's got a nice club on, so we could maybe do some damage to the defensive line, right?
That's it. Yeah, you could maybe pull double duty. But I think you look at the schedule and you're starting to think Chargers again. You want to get to the playoffs. Is this the time to do it? I guess you're thinking home field advantage against the Eagles. Actually, that this is one we want to go for it, but maybe you actually wait a week. Then you look at who you've got. Well, actually, you're hosting the Chiefs, who are now on life support for their season. Then week after that, they've got the Cowboys, I believe. So it's tricky knowing exactly when to go. But again, Chargers just want to get into that postseason. I think it's as simple as that. And I guess it's very easy for me to say, sitting here with a fully healthy hand, but lacking the talent.
Maybe you should just go play for the Colts now. That's what they're missing.
I think it's it's easy to say that they shouldn't be doing it and you should be waiting a little bit longer. You know, these are the moments that these guys play for, to be in the big games, to get into the postseason and everything that follows after that. So, yeah, if he's getting signed off, I just hope he stays healthy.
And I guess then on the flip side of that, for a team who aren't in the playoff contention anymore, so the Commanders are out of the playoffs, we know they're not going to make it. And obviously, Jaden Daniels has already had an injury on his elbow, and then yesterday had to leave the game with another injury on his elbow. As he is the front of their franchise, he is the new look for the Commanders moving forward. And if they're out of the playoffs, again, it's another, hindsight's a great thing. Should we have played him and keep risking the elbow?
I mean, again, we're kind of going through similar patterns here, but the big difference is that
they're not in it.
As a team, they don't have anything to play for. I guess you could say that with Jaden himself, does he have something to prove? So this is someone who is still on his rookie deal. Now, admittedly, he is going to come back. He knows he will be the starter next season. It's not like Daniel Jones to kind of draw that distinction. But is he thinking, first of all, I just want to get out there and play. Secondly, do I want to kind of build up my body of work? Because once you start getting into that third year, then you're starting to think, actually, can I get my second contract? Can I get onto that big money? So again, from us looking outside, you're thinking, well, okay, Colts, Chargers, they're in playoff contention. Commanders, not, you're done for the year. But is there something in the player's mindset, particularly, that you're thinking, this is something I really want to get out there and play and suit up? So is there a factor there? Did he need to do that? Because, best case scenario, Amanda's going to run, but they still finish with a losing record.
Yeah.
Is he better off to start fresh? I think we can absolutely make that argument, but from the player's standpoint, like I say, I think these guys just want to get out there and
just
play.
Want to play, don't they? They just want to play. And we should also say, which might be probably one of the worst injuries I have ever seen was the Zach Ertz injury. Obviously to his ACL, which is a real shame because obviously if it's as bad as we think it possibly is, that's maybe a career ending, and that's a shame because he is such a terrific player and nobody likes to see a player of that caliber go out that way. So we obviously hope that Ertz gets back to full health when he can, and if it's not coming back to the NFL, then obviously, and that's a shame. Yeah. Okay. I'll move on to a nice segment, Gav. Are you ready? So I have not prepped Gav for this at all. I feel like every time Gav's on, we throw something wild at him, right? So I think it's 8. I have 8 would you rather questions for you. And I don't want you to think about them too much because we could then go back and forth all day and we'll be here for hours, right? So my first would you rather. Okay. Would you rather root for the Denver Broncos or the Los Angeles Rams for the Super Bowl? If it was to end today and they were your tops.
Rams.
Okay. Rams.
I like Stafford.
Okay, great. Okay. Would you rather, and this is topical for what we just spoke about, play an injured quarterback in a do-or-die game and risk the season, or would you sit them and potentially lose momentum but protect the future?
I'm playing the quarterback. Do or die. You've got to play him.
Do or die. Got to play him. All right, that's what you're going for. And Gav's going for it in all the 4th and 10s. 4th and 10, he's going for it. Okay. Would you rather your team be the Texans, pulling off a shocking upset and starting the playoff race, or quietly dominate week to week but draw less attention?
Yeah, better to fly under the radar.
Would you rather your team finish the season 9-8 with a wild ride full of crazy games, or 12-5 but completely boring and predictable?
I'm a Giants team, so I'm a Giants fan, so I'm all about the wild ride, I think.
Okay. Would you rather start 2026 as a team in full rebuild mode with a ton of draft picks, or as a borderline contender with a veteran roster but less upside?
I'd rather be the borderline contender. We've talked about the wild experience that I've had. I want a bit of certainty.
A bit of certainty for a change. Right, okay. Would you rather have a superstar quarterback with durability concerns, or a mid-tier quarterback who's always healthy?
I'm going for the superstar.
Superstar?
You need the difference maker.
It's just like Trevor Lawrence, right? No kidding. Listen, he had a great game this week, but that's fine. Would you rather win a tough division by 1 game, constantly under pressure, or cruise through an easy division but never face a serious test?
Win the tough division.
Yeah, that's what I would go for too.
Yeah.
I think that's fair. Okay. And the last one, right? Would you rather be the Chiefs trying to bounce back after a down year, or a surprise team like the Jets trying to shock the league next season?
I'm staying with the Chiefs. Winning culture, they know what it takes to bounce back. I don't think the Jets know what they're doing on the field or off.
or ever. Or just ever in general.
Since 1967.
They don't know what's going on there. Okay. There we go. There was a would you rather. I think like we were quite similar on the would you rathers. I would probably have picked the same picks as you, so that's quite good. Good job. Congrats. Okay.
Good team.
Week 15 is here, and the playoff race is tighter than ever, and every pick and every decision matters. So let's break down the games that we're watching this week. Gav, who do you have your eye on first for the week 15?
Yeah, I mean, there's a mixture of really, really interesting games.
Really bad.
I will, and I think we'll come back to what we talked about before. I think that Bills-Patriots game is fascinating, and maybe not because the Patriots have something to prove. I actually think that the Bills have as much, if not more, to prove in this one. So fantastic timing if you're a UK fan. 6 o'clock kickoff, so it'd be part of Red Zone and the witching hour. Yeah, I think that's going to be a great one to look at for me. And then the other one, I think slightly different in terms of where the two teams stand. Chargers versus Chiefs. Now, Chargers maybe not going to win the division, but I absolutely still need to lock in their playoff place. They have a chance to strike a finishing blow against the Chiefs, who, as we all know, they're really on the fringes. I think defeat next week would actually eliminate them from contention.
I think.
So Yeah, it might require another couple of results to go a particular way. But yeah, I think that one is just going to be interesting to see because we've talked about it at length already. Personally, even if the Chiefs don't make the playoffs, I don't think by any stretch that means that the dynasty is dead. Yes, they'll need to reload, but nevertheless, after a decade of postseason and I think 7 straight championship game appearances, it's going to be a shocker if we don't see Kansas City in the postseason.
Well, yeah, great. What two? Those were two. They were two of my picks for this week. I felt like again, we're said it. It's either they're great games or they're not so great games next week. So my picks are going to be the Rams at the Lions. I always love a Stafford and Goff matchup. I think this is going to be a really interesting game. I don't think there's too much to say about it. I think the Lions are coming off of a great win against the Cowboys. The Rams are coming off against almost essentially what was a shutout for them, and it will be interesting to see if I think the Lions definitely need a win. I think this is much more of a must win for the Lions than it is for the Rams, even though the other two teams in their division are hot on their tail. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that shake up, and that is the late window for the UK on Sunday night. And then here is another one, which is also in the same late window, which is going to be an interesting one, is the Broncos and the Packers. Now, again, as somebody who doesn't really believe in the Broncos, but maybe should probably start believing in the Broncos, I think this is going to be a great matchup because I think, and I've said this before, I think Jordan Love's a bit of a superstar. I think he's great. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they can do against a really, really strong defense in the Broncos. Can we continue to build upon it? Is that going to carry us through and slightly jump? And I think it gets really interesting because obviously we've picked the two tops, currently the first and second seed in the AFC. I think that becomes really interesting if the Pats can win that and the Broncos lose theirs. You're starting to get really interesting. So
yeah, changes those playoff paths, and who has to go where come divisional and conference games. So yeah, I think all of these things matter.
So what an exciting weekend we have coming. But yes, right. So that's week 14 in the books. We are very much coming down to the wire, which is exciting but also sad at the same time. I think I wished the season away in like week 6. And Brian was like, stop doing that. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But we are nearing the end. Things are definitely tightening up. And we will be back next week. Neither me or Gav will be. You're back next week?
I'm back next week, yeah.
Oh, you're back next week. Okay, I have another week off. So, sorry, friends, you don't have to listen to me. It means that means I'll be back after. Oh, I'll be back after the Broncos Jags game. That can't be good. Okay.
Yeah, that could be jeopardy.
Yep, jeopardy for that point. But yes, Gavin, thank you so much for joining me as always today.
Absolute pleasure.
Pleasure. And then maybe I'll think of another segment to give you some random questions and for the next time.
Feed it into Brian for next week.
Yeah, exactly right. I'll just start putting the feelers out for it right now. But yes, please make sure to check us out on YouTube and subscribe to us if you're watching via YouTube. You can find all of our previous week's shows and our In Conversation With series, which we've had a bit of a break from, but we will be back very, very soon with some new, very exciting guests sharing of everything about their stories around American football. And make sure you have your notifications turned on for anywhere you get your podcasts. But thank you all for listening and watching. We'll be back next week. And until then, we will see you soon.